This critique examines a script for the first episode of an English learning audio show aimed at teaching absolute beginners basic greetings and introductions. And diving right in, the complexity of the introductory conversation fundamentally contradicts the beginner level of the instructional material.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, the tension surfaces right in the opening lines of the script.
Right.
You have these two hosts setting up the premise, and they're using this highly fluent, really idiomatic English to try and comfort the listener. One of them says, every fluent speaker was once a beginner.
Which sounds nice, sure.
Right. And the other one jumps in with, I know that feeling. Sometimes I know the words, but I don't know how to start a conversation.
Yeah.
The intent is obviously to alleviate anxiety, but the weakness is that a listener tuning in just to learn how to say good morning isn't going to understand a single word of this complex, fast-paced pep talk.
Exactly.
The script assumes this high level of fluency in the setup that it just immediately abandons when the actual lesson starts. It creates this massive barrier to entry right at the threshold.
Wait, but isn't it a common immersion technique in language learning to speak at a normal conversational pace?
What do you mean?
Like, just to get the listener's ear used to the rhythm and the cadence of the language, even if they don't catch every single word? I mean, maybe the creators are going for this sort of immersive sound bath.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like intentionally flooding the listener with native cadences so their brain starts pattern matching before the formal instruction even begins.
Sure, and immersion is definitely a valid pedagogical tool. But there's a vital difference between immersion and foundational instruction, especially when we're dealing with zero-level adult beginners.
How so?
Well, if we look at linguistic theory, like Stephen Krashen's concept of the affective filter.
Oh, right, the affective filter.
Exactly. It shows how critical a person's emotional state is to language acquisition. If a student feels overwhelmed or anxious, or just fundamentally out of their depth, their brain essentially puts up this defensive wall.
And nothing gets through.
Right. When that wall goes up, no learning can happen. It doesn't matter how well structured the rest of the curriculum is. Adult learners, especially, are already battling their own egos.
Because they're used to being competent adults.
Exactly. They have complex careers, they manage households, they navigate nuanced social structures every single day in their native language, and suddenly they're placed in this learning environment where they're reduced to the linguistic capability of a toddler.
Man, that loss of identity is inherently stressful. Like, it is incredibly humbling to go from being a manager at a logistics firm to struggling to say, the cat is black.
Yes. It's so frustrating.
So when you hit a true beginner with these long paragraphs of rapid-fire, fluent dialogue, it doesn't feel like a comforting sound bath. It feels like drowning.
That is the perfect way to describe it. They're explicitly trying to lower the listener's anxiety, but by using syntax and vocabulary that's miles above their head, they are actively inducing the exact panic they want to prevent.
Because it forces the listener to grapple with this massive cognitive load before the actual lesson even gets off the ground.
Right. Cognitive load management is everything in instructional design, especially in audio, where you can't just pause and reread a paragraph. You only have so much working memory.
Yeah, you can't skim audio.
Exactly. So in language acquisition, there's this concept of comprehensible input, which is often just summarized as I+1. The I is the learner's current level, and the +1 is input that's just one step beyond their current competence.
So it stretches them slightly, but remains understandable through context.
Right, but what this script is doing in its introduction is more like I+10. The learner has zero context to decode phrases like every fluent speaker if they don't even know the word hello yet. It's just a wall of sound.
So if they burn all their cognitive fuel trying to decipher the introductory banter, just trying to isolate where one word ends and the next begins, they'll be totally exhausted and frustrated by the time they're actually asked to learn the core curriculum.
Exactly. They'll just tune out.
Okay, so to solve this gap between the listener's comprehension and the script's vocabulary, we really need to comprehensively realign the host banter.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think there are two primary paths to bridge this. The first is to use a bilingual approach for the introduction, where one host acts as a bridge, speaking in the listener's native language to explain the concepts and establish comfort.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, and then they can gently hand things over to the English-speaking host. The second path, assuming the show has to remain entirely in English, is to radically simplify the introductory vocabulary and syntax so that it mirrors the extreme beginner level of the upcoming lesson.
Let's look at how that second path would fundamentally change the script, like keeping it entirely in English but just simplifying it.
Okay, how would you rewrite it?
Well, instead of having a host deliver this complex multi-clause sentence like, "Sometimes I know the words, but I don't know how to start a conversation," you just scale it all the way back to the absolute basics.
Like what?
One host could simply say, "English is hard." And the other replies, "Yes, but we make it easy."
Oh, wow. Yeah, that communicates the exact same comforting sentiment.
Right, but it uses highly accessible, fundamental vocabulary. It actually respects that I+1 rule we talked about by using short declarative sentences.
Or, looking at the first path, the bilingual one, the co-host could actually play the role of the beginner. They could ask questions in the target listener's native language, like Spanish or Mandarin, expressing their nervousness.
Yeah, they could say something like, "Estoy un poco nervioso por empezar."
Right. And then the main host could respond with really simple English words, gently guiding their co-host and, by extension, the listener, into the actual lesson.
The bilingual bridge is incredibly powerful because it acknowledges the learner's starting point. It basically turns the audio show into a safe harbor.
Yeah, it really does.
By grounding the setup in a language the listener already understands, you completely bypass that affective filter. You build trust using materials the learner can actually grasp.
Right, it validates their presence in the classroom. But, even if we fix the vocabulary in the introduction, it only solves the entry point.
True.
It doesn't fix the core instructional content. Which leads us to the next issue. The dialogue examples provided for the learner lack the natural, authentic flavor of modern conversational English.
This is a huge one. The script explicitly promises real English for real life and no boring lessons, which is a very strong, very appealing value proposition.
Oh, it's a great hook.
But the weakness is that the script immediately pivots to teaching these robotic, textbook standard phrases. It teaches the listener to respond to, "How are you?" with, "I'm fine, thank you."
Right, the classic textbook line.
Exactly.
And later, for the self-introduction, it instructs them to say, "I am happy to be here." Native speakers rarely use this exact stiff phrasing in casual daily interactions.
No, almost never.
So by relying on these archaic textbook standards, the script just completely fails to deliver on its core promise of natural, real-life speech.
It's honestly a bit of a bait and switch.
Yeah.
It's like promising someone a hands-on gourmet cooking class, but when they arrive, you just hand them a written recipe for boiling water. It completely undercuts the excitement of the pitch.
Boiling water, yeah. That's exactly what it feels like. I'll push back a little here, though, regarding curriculum design. Is starting with these stiff basics simply a necessary evil of language acquisition?
What do you mean by necessary evil?
Well, in traditional education, there's a heavy reliance on standardizing the baseline. You teach the rigid, grammatically perfect baseline, the "I am fine, thank you," because it's universally understood and safe regardless of dialect or region.
Right, the safe option.
Doesn't a beginner kind of need that rigid foundation before they can move on to more relaxed, colloquial slang?
I mean, it is a debate that constantly surfaces in educational circles, primarily because curriculums are historically built for classrooms where grading needs to be standardized.
Right. You need a right or wrong answer for the test.
Exactly. For decades, language instruction prioritized written accuracy over spoken pragmatics. It's very easy for a teacher to look at a test and grade "I am fine, thank you" as correct.
But this isn't a test.
Exactly. This audio script isn't a graded university course. It's explicitly promising practical application. Yes, having a grammatically safe baseline is helpful, but focusing solely on that rigid baseline ignores the actual social function of language. We really have to consider register.
Register, right, because language is highly context-dependent. The way you speak to a judge in traffic court is entirely different from the way you speak to your neighbor over the fence.
100%. People learn a new language because they want to connect with others. They want to sound approachable, equal, and, well, human.
Yeah, if you only arm them with highly formal textbook phrases, you send them out into the real world completely unprepared for how actual humans speak. And that creates an enormous amount of social friction.
It really does. Imagine them walking up to a barista in a local coffee shop.
Right, and instead of saying, "Hey, how's it going?" they deliver a formal address like, "Good morning, I am happy to be here." It makes the interaction incredibly awkward.
It changes the power dynamic of the conversation entirely. Overly formal language often positions the learner in a subservient or overly deferential role, rather than as a peer.
And the learner is going to sense that awkwardness immediately.
Definitely. They'll notice that the native speaker's reaction is slightly confused, or that the rhythm of the interaction just sort of stumbles, and they will become hyper-aware that they sound like a machine.
Which brings us right back to the affective filter.
Exactly. The anxiety of sounding robotic and failing to connect socially will make them hesitate to speak at all in the future. We want to build their confidence to navigate real-world interactions smoothly, not prepare them for a formal diplomatic summit.
So the most elegant fix here would be to introduce slightly more natural, everyday variations immediately alongside those formal textbook answers.
Yes, just present both.
You don't have to abandon the formal version entirely. You can teach it as the safe, formal option, maybe explain that it's good for a job interview, but you must immediately offer the colloquial version to fulfill the promise of practical, real-world usage.
It empowers them with choices, right? And it validates the colloquial speech they'll inevitably hear in movies or just walking down the street.
Right.
When teaching the response to, "How are you?" the script currently just marches through, "I'm fine, thank you. I'm doing well," and "Great, thanks."
Very stiff.
So to fix this, the script should explicitly point out what native speakers actually say in contrast to the textbook. The host could say, "You can say, 'I'm fine, thank you,' but in real life, most people just say, 'I'm good, thanks,' or even just, 'not bad.'"
Yeah, it takes exactly the same amount of airtime. It adds infinite practical value. We are essentially giving them the formal suit, but we also have to give them the comfortable jeans and a t-shirt so they have options depending on the context of their conversation.
I love that analogy.
And for the closing introduction, instead of the highly formal and slightly awkward, "I am happy to be here," the script should suggest teaching something universally warm and natural, like, "It's great to meet you."
It's great to meet you. Yeah, that's so much better.
It's just as simple to pronounce, but it immediately makes the learner sound authentically conversational. It really elevates the material from a sterile classroom exercise to a genuine tool for human connection.
But even if we fix the vocabulary, like giving them colloquial phrases like, "I'm good, thanks," it won't matter if the listener physically cannot practice saying them out loud.
Which brings us to a major flaw in how this script actually utilizes audio. The script's current structure for practice exercises completely misses the opportunity to engage the listener in active audio-based participation.
Yeah, this is a critical mechanical issue. It really reveals a misunderstanding of pacing curves in educational audio.
Let's look at how the practice sessions are mapped out on the page right now. When the host introduces the greetings like good morning, good afternoon, the co-host says, "Let me try," and then simply repeats the phrases immediately.
Right away, yeah.
The weakness here is that there is no built-in pause, no mechanic, and no explicit prompt for the listener at home to practice speaking aloud.
Right.
It treats the audio medium like a traditional radio broadcast meant to be passively consumed, rather than an interactive classroom space. And furthermore, at the very end, the script tells the listener to practice these sentences 3 times today.
I hate when they do that.
Right? It essentially abandons the learner after the recording ends, hoping they'll do the homework, rather than actively guiding them through the practice during the audio experience itself.
It represents a fundamental misunderstanding of how the brain moves information from passive recognition to active production.
How so?
Well, in neuroscience, we look at different areas of the brain. Wernicke's area handles comprehension, while Broca's area handles speech production. You can passively listen to hours of a language and drastically improve your comprehension, but that doesn't automatically translate to the physical ability to produce those sounds.
Because if the co-host fires right back with the answer, the listener at home doesn't even have a second to process the instruction.
Exactly. Let alone actually move their mouth to form the words.
Yeah. The physical reality of the audience cannot be overlooked here. Audio is an intimate but highly distracted medium.
Definitely.
The listener is probably commuting on a crowded highway, or washing dishes with the water running, or walking the dog down a noisy street. They aren't sitting at a desk with a notebook fully focused on the speaker.
Almost never.
So if the script doesn't carve out physical time and space in the audio file for them to speak, they simply won't do it. The pacing of the dialogue is currently working entirely against the pedagogical goal.
Exactly. When you're forming new phonetic sounds that don't exist in your native language, you are literally building new muscle memory in your mouth, your tongue, and your jaw.
You're basically retraining your vocal tract.
Yes, and that requires significant cognitive processing time. You have to hear the prompt, decode the meaning, formulate the physical response, and then execute it.
Which takes time.
Right. If the audio steps on that processing time by immediately moving to the next line of dialogue, the active learning just stops. The listener is forced into a passive listening mode simply because they cannot keep up with the broadcast.
So if the co-host can't just parrot the phrase, we have to script actual silence? I'm assuming that means literally writing a pause into the text. But how long is long enough for a beginner without creating dead air that makes the listener, check their phone to see if the audio app crashed?
That's the balance you have to strike.
Right, so if the creator wants to bridge this gap, they should fundamentally redesign the practice segments to actively leverage the audio medium.
Yeah, the creators need to construct explicit, timed spaces for listener repetition, utilizing the audio landscape to clearly cue audience participation.
So we're designing the audio white space.
Exactly. You have to design the audio white space just as carefully as you design the dialogue itself. This is what sets apart elite audiolingual programs from amateur instruction.
Right.
Instead of the co-host immediately parroting the phrase, the script should explicitly invite the listener into the exercise. It should read something like, "Now it's your turn. I will say good morning, and I want you to repeat it out loud wherever you are. Ready? Good morning."
And at that point, the script must explicitly direct the audio editor to insert a 3 to 4 second pause of absolute silence. Or, perhaps a low ambient room tone so the audio doesn't sound entirely dead.
Yes, 3 to 4 seconds is usually the sweet spot for a short phrase. It gives the listener permission and the literal space to try. It overcomes that fear of speaking into the void.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to take it a step further, the script can incorporate a subtle sound design cue. It could indicate a soft chime, a subtle swoosh, or a specific musical beat that plays right before the pause.
Oh, like a Pavlovian response for learning?
Exactly.
You train the listener so that every time they hear that specific chime cutting through the noise of their commute or their kitchen, they know, this is my cue, this is my moment to speak. It anchors their attention.
It really does. It turns the audio format from a limitation into a highly effective, interactive teaching mechanism.
It transforms the script from a simple dialogue between two hosts into a three-way conversation that includes the audience as an active participant.
Right. Instead of abandoning the learner and just hoping that practice later on their own time, you guarantee they practice right now, in the moment, guided by the instructor.
Okay, to wrap up our analysis, we've identified 3 major areas to elevate this script. First, the opening banter needs to be simplified or bridged bilingually so that its complexity actually aligns with an absolute beginner's level.
Right, ensuring we don't overwhelm the listener before the lesson even starts.
Second, the dialogue examples need to be modernized by replacing stiff, robotic textbook phrases with genuinely natural conversational options, fulfilling the promise of teaching real English.
Get rid of, "I am fine, thank you."
Exactly. And finally, the audio structure itself must be redesigned with explicitly scripted, timed pauses, and audio cues to force active listener participation rather than passive consumption.
Implementing these changes will require a bit of a shift in perspective for the creators.
For sure.
It means moving away from simply broadcasting information and moving toward engineering and experience. Simplifying the intro lowers the affective filter. Injecting colloquialisms builds genuine connection, and mapping out those crucial gaps for audience repetition builds physical capability.
Beautifully said. We invite the creator of this script to take these suggestions, apply them to the material, and submit the revised draft back to us for another round of feedback. We'd really love to see how this evolves.
Yeah, send it back in.
Ultimately, we want to make sure the student knows exactly how to use the parachute before we ask them to jump.